The glass doors of Blackwood Enterprises shimmered under the bright Manhattan morning, reflecting the steel skyline like a mirror. Inside, the lobby buzzed with the symphony of a thriving corporation. Heels clicking on marble floors, soft murmurs of employees discussing strategy, the hiss of espresso machines from the cafe corner. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of polished wood, giving the office an air of efficiency and understated luxury. At the very top of this empire, in a corner office with walls of glass overlooking the city, sat Alexander Blackwood, billionaire, CEO, and the kind of man whose presence alone could silence a room. He was sharp, calculating, and infamous for his exacting standards. People whispered that he demanded perfection not just from his employees, but from life itself. Yet, despite his wealth and influence, there was an unmistakable solitude in his eyes, a guardedness few could penetrate. Today, Alexander had little patience for distractions. Board meetings awaited, investor calls piled up, and a merger worth hundreds of millions demanded his attention. But seated across from him in the sleek leather chair was someone he couldn't ignore, a candidate for the position of his new executive assistant, Maya Johnson. Maya smoothed the front of her tailored blazer, her fingers brushing the edges of the leather portfolio she held. She had rehearsed this day in her mind countless times, yet the nerves fluttering in her stomach were impossible to suppress. Her admiration for Alexander was professional, yes, but deeper than she would ever admit, not even to herself. She had followed Blackwood Enterprises' meteoric rise, fascinated by the man who could command boardrooms and headlines with the same effortless authority. And now, sitting here, she was acutely aware of the opportunity and the danger before her. Alexander studied her silently, his blue eyes sharp and assessing. He had interviewed dozens of assistants before, each either too timid, too bold, or too eager to please. He needed someone precise, intelligent, and unflinching, a rare combination. Maya's calm composure caught his attention immediately. She wasn't fidgeting, she wasn't nervously smiling, and she wasn't overcompensating with rehearsed charm. She simply existed, poised and professional, and that both intrigued and irritated him. "Ms. Johnson," he began, his voice crisp and controlled, "this will not be a typical interview. I do not tolerate mistakes. Ever." Maya met his gaze evenly, hiding the sudden quickening of her pulse. "Understood, Mr. Blackwood. I value precision and accountability." He arched a skeptical eyebrow. "Words are cheap. Show me results. Tell me, how would you handle a situation where two executives clash, and you're the only person capable of mediating without offending either?" Maya's mind raced, recalling her previous experience managing office conflicts. "I would first gather all relevant facts," she said calmly, "then speak to each party individually to understand their perspective. I would propose a solution that prioritizes the company's objectives over personal pride and communicate clearly to prevent misunderstandings." Alexander leaned back slightly, folding his hands. There was something in her answer, clarity, composure, confidence, that almost impressed him. Almost. Reasonable. But theory is easy. Execution is the real test. We'll see if you measure up. The interview continued, each question crafted not just to probe skill, but to test composure under pressure. Maya answered with careful thought, never flinching under Alexander's intense scrutiny. Yet he couldn't shake a faint irritation. She wasn't just competent. She was audacious in her quiet way, challenging him by simply holding her own. It was subtle, infuriating, and fascinating. Finally, Alexander straightened, his expression neutral but precise. "I'll give you a trial week. Start tomorrow. Impress me or you won't last a month." Maya nodded, masking the relief that surged through her chest. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. I won't disappoint you." As she left the office, Maya felt a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. Alexander Blackwood was legendary for breaking employees with impossible expectations, and yet she felt a spark of determination she hadn't felt in years. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, a chance to prove herself in an environment that demanded excellence, where every success mattered. Meanwhile, Alexander remained seated, staring at the closed door long after she had left. A part of him couldn't stop replaying the interview in his mind. The way she had answered with calm precision, the way she hadn't flinched under his scrutiny. He was drawn to her efficiency, yet irritated by it. He dismissed it as curiosity, though something more persistent lingered. What he didn't realize and could not have guessed was the secret Maya carried with her. Beneath her professional demeanor, behind the calm exterior, she was deeply, hopelessly in love with the man in the office. Every glance, every word, every subtle gesture she made was carefully measured to hide feelings that could destroy her composure if revealed too soon. Alexander assumed her restraint was mere professionalism, perhaps even mild disdain for his reputation. He had no idea that each polite smile hid an admiration that went far beyond the office walls. And so, an intricate dance began, two people circling each other in a world of assumptions, misunderstandings, and unspoken traction. In the coming days, every glance, every exchange, would carry more weight than either could yet comprehend. Alexander, proud and guarded, would misread her actions, while Maya, careful and cautious, would struggle to keep her feelings hidden. And in the heart of Manhattan, amid glass towers and the hum of high-powered corporate life, two lives had quietly collided, setting in motion a story of tension, desire, and unexpected love. The following evening, Blackwood Enterprises hosted a gala in celebration of its latest multi-million-dollar merger. The grand ballroom of the city's most luxurious hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers, mirrored walls reflecting the warm golden glow of candles and soft spotlights. Executives in tailored suits and gowns mingled gracefully, champagne glasses in hand, while a string quartet played a delicate, enchanting melody in the corner. Alexander Blackwood rarely attended such events. Social gatherings were distractions, opportunities for people to charm with flattery or pitch half-baked ideas. But tonight was different. Tonight, investors and partners critical to the next phase of the company's growth would be present. Alexander, as always, moved through the crowd with the effortless confidence of a man who owned the room. Eyes followed him, whispers tracing his every step. Yet Alexander's attention was not on the admiring onlookers. It was on Maya Johnson, standing elegantly near the refreshment table, holding herself with perfect composure despite clearly being out of her usual office element. Maya's gown was understated yet striking, a deep navy sheath dress that complemented her skin tone and hinted at sophistication rather than extravagance. She had styled her hair simply, letting soft curls frame her face, and her makeup was impeccable without drawing attention. She looked different from the competent, composed assistant Alexander had met in his office. There was a warmth in her presence tonight, a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate effortlessly. Alexander approached her, deliberately casual, though internally he noted every detail. The way she stood, the subtle tilt of her head, the way her eyes scanned the room, not for gossip or attention, but for patterns, anticipating potential challenges. His chest tightened slightly as he realized he was watching her like a strategist analyzing a board game, instead of simply enjoying the moment. "Ms. Johnson," he said smoothly, leaning slightly as if she were the only person in the room. "You clean up well." Maya blinked, startled by the rare, casual compliment. She forced herself to smile, hiding the flush that crept up her neck. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. You don't look too bad yourself." Her tone was light, teasing, though she carefully avoided sounding flirtatious. He raised an eyebrow, amused. "I see you've mastered the art of sarcasm. Dangerous skill for an assistant." She chuckled softly, the sound barely audible over the music and chatter. "I assure you it's harmless mostly." As the evening progressed, Alexander watched Maya navigate the crowd with ease. She listened attentively to executives and clients, asked insightful questions, and contributed subtly to conversations without overstepping. He found himself paying closer attention to her than to the people whose investments mattered to the company. Each time she laughed politely at a joke or tilted her head to emphasize a point, he felt an unexpected pull. Maya, meanwhile, struggled to maintain her composure. Being near Alexander, so confident, so magnetic, was both exhilarating and terrifying. She caught herself stealing glances at him, noting how his posture exuded control, how the faint crease in his brow when he was concentrating made him almost human. She knew she couldn't reveal her feelings, not here, not now. And yet, every small interaction, The way he smiled at her observation, the way he subtly guided her through conversations, made her heart race. A moment of quiet intimacy arrived unexpectedly. The orchestra played a slower, more romantic piece, and Alexander found himself beside Maya near a large window overlooking the city lights. The city sprawled below them, glittering like a sea of stars, yet all Alexander could focus on was the way Maya's profile was illuminated by the chandelier above. "You seem different tonight," he remarked, his voice softer than usual. Confident, relaxed, not the nervous assistant I met this morning. Maya glanced at him, hiding the warmth that rose to her cheeks. "Perhaps you only saw one version of me," she replied evenly, though her tone betrayed a hint of amusement. "People are often more complex than they appear, Mr. Blackwood." He smirked slightly, intrigued. "Complexity, huh? Dangerous for someone in your position." "Perhaps," she said, her eyes twinkling, "but manageable." The subtle teasing hung in the air between them like a spark waiting to ignite. Alexander found himself leaning slightly closer, conscious of the delicate distance that separated them. Maya, sensing the change, felt her pulse quicken and quickly adjusted her posture, as if nothing had happened. Yet neither could deny the tension or the attraction that had flared in that brief exchange. The night continued with speeches and toasts. Alexander noticed how Maya remained composed, even when other assistants were distracted or fawning over him. She didn't seek attention, yet she commanded it effortlessly simply by being herself. That realization unsettled him in a way he hadn't expected. He was used to people responding to him, not the other way around. Later, as the gala began winding down, Alexander offered to escort Maya to the car. Outside, the crisp evening air was refreshing, carrying the faint scent of the city after a brief drizzle. She tucked a stray curl behind her ear, her hands clasped in front of her. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly, her voice sincere. It was informative to see the company in this light. He studied her, noticing the subtle vulnerability in her tone. "You did well tonight," he said quietly. "Better than I expected." Her heart skipped a beat, though she kept her composure. "I'm glad you think so," she replied, forcing casual neutrality. For a moment, they lingered in silence, both aware of the invisible thread pulling them together, both afraid to acknowledge it. Alexander wanted to say something more, to bridge the distance that professionalism demanded they maintain. But before he could, his phone buzzed. Another call from a client demanding immediate attention. He sighed, irritation flashing briefly across his features. "I should go," he muttered, almost reluctantly. "Good night, Miss Johnson." "Good night, Mr. Blackwood," she replied, though her eyes lingered a moment longer than necessary. As he walked away, Alexander couldn't shake the memory of her subtle elegance, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke, or the slight curve of her lips when she smiled. For the first time in a long while, he wondered if someone could exist in his world who was more than a subordinate, someone who could challenge him, intrigue him, even unsettle him. Maya, meanwhile, leaned against the car, trying to calm the thrum of her heart. She had sensed his attention, felt the small moments of connection, yet she knew better than to hope. Alexander Blackwood was brilliant, complex, and untouchable, and she, as loyal assistant, could never reveal the depth of her feelings. Not yet. The night ended with unspoken words, stolen glances, and a tension that neither could ignore. What had begun as a professional trial had quietly evolved into something more, a spark of attraction that would grow, complicate, and eventually consume them both in ways they could never have anticipated. And thus, the stage was set. Misunderstandings would follow. Small victories and defeats would test their boundaries, and the dance of desire and restraint had only just begun. The next week at Blackwood Enterprises began like any other, a whirlwind of meetings, reports, and client calls. Maya had settled into her role with surprising ease, earning the quiet respect of other employees while carefully navigating Alexander's exacting standards. Yet beneath her composed exterior, a storm of feelings churned. Anticipation, nervousness, and almost dizzying attraction to the very man whose approval she sought. Alexander, for his part, continued to watch her closely, though he refused to admit why. There were moments when he caught her off guard, a glance too knowing, a subtle smirk at a sarcastic remark, the way she anticipated his next move in a project before he even voiced it. And every time, he felt that strange tightening in his chest he refused to label. But misunderstandings were already beginning to form, subtle yet potent. It happened during a morning briefing. Alexander had been discussing the company's latest merger when a slip of the tongue caused him to refer unintentionally to a junior employee's repeated mistakes. Maya, entering the room at that moment, overheard only a fragment of conversation. "Assistants like that are a headache," Alexander muttered. Not noticing her presence, Maya's heart sank. Her stomach twisted, a sudden heat rising to her cheeks. She knew he hadn't meant her. He never had. But in that instant, her mind refused to hear reason. She forced herself to nod politely at the staff around her, hiding the sting behind professional mask. "He thinks I'm incompetent." The thought echoed in her mind relentlessly, undermining the confidence she had worked so hard to project. Alexander, oblivious of misunderstanding, continued his briefing, completely unaware of the tension he had just created. To him, Maya was simply running late to the meeting, nothing more. Later that afternoon, the rain began to fall in sheets, the city streets glistening under the streetlights. Maya had stayed late, finalizing an urgent report for Alexander, when she realized she'd left her umbrella at the office. Cursing softly under her breath, she stepped into the downpour, clutching her briefcase close to her chest. "Need a ride?" a familiar voice called out. Maya looked up to see Alexander standing beside a sleek black car, the faint sheen of rain on its hood. He had apparently noticed her predicament from his office window. I can manage," Maya replied quickly, though her words were drowned by the patter of rain. She didn't want to appear needy. Alexander didn't respond immediately. Instead, he approached her with a measured, almost predatory calm, offering the car keys. "Step inside. You'll ruin that outfit and yourself if you don't." Maya hesitated only for a moment before accepting, sliding into the leather seat beside him. The interior smelled faintly of leather and cedarwood, a combination both luxurious and intimate. The car pulled away from the curb, tires hissing against the wet pavement. For several moments, neither spoke. The hum of the engine filled the silence, punctuated by the rhythmic tapping of rain against the windows. Maya kept her eyes fixed outside, unwilling to meet his gaze. She could feel the tension coiling in the space between them, a tension that was simultaneously frustrating and magnetic. Finally, Alexander broke the silence. "You seem distracted," he said, his tone carefully neutral, though his eyes betrayed curiosity. Maya swallowed, forcing herself to keep her voice steady. "Just finishing some work in my head. The merger details, client feedback, etc." She paused, hoping the mundane explanation would suffice. He studied her, noticing the subtle tightening of her jaw, the faint blush that hadn't quite faded from earlier. "Is that really all?" he asked, his voice low, almost teasing. Her stomach lurched. She wanted to deny it, to insist that her thoughts were purely professional, but the flicker in his eyes suggested he already knew she was lying. She forced a polite smile. "Of course. Just professional, nothing else." Alexander's gaze lingered, sharp and calculating, yet softened by an unspoken curiosity. He had begun to notice the small, telling details. The way she bit her lip when nervous, the way her eyes softened when she was passionate about something, the way she carried herself as though every movement mattered. He didn't understand why it fascinated him, only that it did. As the car reached her apartment building, Maya's hands trembled slightly as she fumbled for her keys. Alexander noticed immediately the small gesture pulling at something inside him. "You'll be fine," he said quietly, a rare gentleness threading his words. Maya looked up at him, startled. His expression was uncharacteristically soft, almost vulnerable. She found herself staring longer than she intended, heart pounding. "Thank you," she murmured, barely audible over the rain. The awkwardness hung in the air like electricity, both of them acutely aware of the unspoken tension. Alexander wanted to reach out, to brush a stray strand of wet hair from her face, but hesitated, constrained by propriety, by professional boundaries. Maya, simultaneously drawn and cautious, kept her distance, though every nerve in her body screamed otherwise. Finally, she broke the moment by stepping out of the car. Alexander waited, watching her retreat up the wet steps to her apartment. The door closed softly behind her, leaving him staring after her with an intensity he didn't yet understand. That night, neither of them slept easily. Maya replayed the car ride over and over, analyzing every word, every glance. She chastised herself for reading too much into a professional gesture, yet the warmth in her chest refused to dissipate. Alexander, in his penthouse overlooking the city, found himself staring at the empty seat beside him, recalling the curve of her smile, the way her eyes had met his just long enough to leave a mark. Both were trapped in the first stage of a dangerous dance. Misunderstandings mingled with desire, each moment charged with unspoken emotions. Alexander thought she was distant, professional, perhaps even disinterested. Maya feared he was indifferent or critical, yet every interaction drew her closer. And in the heart of the city, amid rain-slicked streets and glowing streetlights, the two of them were already entangled, unwittingly, inexorably, and irrevocably. The tension was only the beginning. Soon, every glance, every word, every minor conflict would serve as another step in the complex game of hearts that neither of them was prepared to play. The week after the gala, the office hummed with the usual rhythm of deadlines, conference calls, and strategic planning. Yet an undercurrent of tension lingered, one that Alexander and Maya both felt, but neither dared to acknowledge openly. Their interactions were charged with unspoken emotion. Glances lingered too long. Conversations held subtle teasing or veiled admiration, and each small gesture seemed loaded with hidden meaning. The day began with an unexpected announcement from Alexander. "We're heading to a weekend corporate retreat," he declared during the morning briefing, his tone brisk but commanding. "Strategic planning workshops and team exercises. Attendance is mandatory for all senior staff and their assistants." Maya's heart skipped a beat. The retreat meant spending extended time near Alexander, alone outside the office, with fewer distractions to mask feelings or intentions. She both dreaded and anticipated it, aware that her carefully maintained professionalism would be tested. The retreat took place at a sprawling countryside estate, far from the city's chaos. Rain-soaked cobblestone paths led to an elegant manor with high ceilings, warm wooden interiors, and panoramic views of misty hills. The setting was picturesque, almost cinematic, and offered an unusual intimacy compared to the controlled environment of the office. From the moment they arrived, tensions flared, not just between Alexander and Maya, but from outside forces as well. Olivia Kane, a senior associate with a history of petty jealousy, seemed intent on creating friction. She had watched Alexander's attention linger on Maya during the gala and was determined to undermine the assistant's credibility. "You really think you can keep up with him?" Olivia whispered to another colleague, loud enough for Maya to overhear. "He notices everything. One slip and you're gone." Maya clenched her fists subtly, masking frustration. She had no intention of playing office politics, but the implication stung. She reminded herself of her capabilities, drawing strength from the quiet confidence she had built over years of navigating challenging environments. Throughout the retreat, Alexander and Maya were paired for several exercises, including team strategy games, problem-solving workshops, and evening brainstorming sessions. Their proximity sparked subtle tension, each aware of the other's presence, yet constrained by social norms and professional decorum. One evening, during a private walk along the estate's misty garden paths, Maya finally allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. The soft drizzle left the world muted, intimate, almost cinematic in its melancholy. "You know," Maya began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I've admired you for a long time, not just professionally, but personally." She hesitated, her pulse racing. "You've built something incredible, Alexander. I followed your work, and I respect you more than I probably should." Alexander stopped, stunned, the words sinking in. His usual composure faltered, replaced by something unfamiliar: awe, curiosity, and an unexpected warmth. "Maya, he hesitated, unsure how to respond. He had suspected, hoped even, but hearing her admit it openly changed everything. Before he could continue, Olivia appeared seemingly by accident. stepping onto the path with a forced smile. "There you are. Alexander, we need to discuss the Johnson file immediately. Important updates." Maya's pulse jumped. She turned, flustered, suddenly painfully aware of the awkwardness. Alexander, recovering quickly, nodded. "Later," he said curtly, though his eyes lingered on Maya a moment longer than necessary. The interruption left Maya shaken, both exhilarated and frustrated. She had risked revealing her admiration, only to have circumstances pull them apart. And Alexander, though intrigued, had to maintain control, suppressing the flustered curiosity that bubbled within him. The following day, a rival plan emerged. Olivia had discovered an overlooked detail in a client report, something trivial, yet she presented it to Alexander as if Maya had been negligent. Alexander's initial reaction was sharp, his expression cold and measured. "Maya," he said, his tone slicing to the morning air, "this is unacceptable. Are you sure you reviewed the document carefully?" Maya's heart sank, but she met his gaze steadily. "I did, sir. I double-checked the figures, and everything matches the source data. This discrepancy seems to have arisen from an external update that wasn't communicated." Alexander's eyes narrowed. A brief silence followed, tense and heavy. Then he exhaled slowly, the frost in his expression softening just enough. "I see. Thank you for clarifying." Olivia's smile faltered, realizing her attempt to provoke friction had failed. Maya's composure had not only deflected the sabotage, but subtly impressed Alexander, reinforcing the respect he was beginning to feel. Later that evening, after a long day of workshops and strategy sessions, Maya found herself alone in the estate's library, the soft hum of the fireplace filling the room. She allowed herself a rare moment of introspection, reflecting on the week so far. Her admiration for Alexander had deepened, but so had the complexity of her emotions. She struggled with the delicate balance between professional boundaries and the desire to confess her feelings fully. Alexander, in his own private study, paced restlessly. Maya's confession from the previous evening lingered in his mind. Her words had been careful, restrained, yet filled with sincerity. The realization that she had harbored feelings for him, long before he even noticed, stirred something unexpected. It was both thrilling and unnerving, a challenge to the carefully constructed control he maintained over his life and heart. That night, sleep came fitfully for both of them. Maya dreamt of moments where she could speak freely, where her admiration and affection were no longer confined by professional decorum. Alexander's thoughts were similarly restless, imagining scenarios where he could reciprocate without jeopardizing the fragile boundaries between them. By the weekend's end, the retreat had achieved more than strategic planning and team bonding. It had revealed vulnerabilities, aspirations, and hidden tensions. Maya had shown her intellect, grace under pressure, and unwavering professionalism, while Alexander had glimpsed the depth of her character, and, for the first time, wondered what it might mean to let someone in beyond the walls of his carefully controlled life. And though neither fully admitted it yet, the retreat had cemented a truth neither could ignore. Their connection was no longer limited to office interactions. The spark that had ignited the gala had grown into a quiet flame, fueled by admiration, subtle teasing, and shared experiences. Misunderstandings lingered, of course, and rival interference threatened to complicate matters further, but the foundation was set. As the car carried them back to the city, the estate disappearing behind them, Maya and Alexander remained in a delicate balance, on the cusp of revelation, yet bound by the unspoken rules of their professional world. Both were aware that the next encounter, the next glance, the next word could tip the scales toward clarity or further misunderstanding, toward confession or continued restraint. One thing, however, had become undeniable. Neither could ignore the pull any longer. It was subtle, relentless, and dangerously intoxicating. And as the city lights reappeared on the horizon, reflecting in the rain-soaked streets, both of them knew deep down that the game of hearts had begun, and there was no turning back. The week following the retreat began with a whirlwind of high-stakes business activity. Blackwood Enterprises was navigating a critical merger, one that could make or break its next fiscal quarter. The boardroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation, and Alexander Blackwood, as always, presided with calculated precision. Maya had been entrusted with preparing the final analysis for the merger, a task only she could handle, given her meticulous attention to detail and unparalleled understanding of Alexander's preferences. It was both an honor and a heavy responsibility, one that left her working late into the night, carefully balancing spreadsheets, cross-referencing data, and preparing a presentation that would withstand the scrutiny of the board and Alexander himself. Alexander, observing her from his office, felt a mixture of admiration and frustration. He knew she was capable, and yet he worried she might push herself too hard. The subtle concern he felt for her was new, unfamiliar, a stark contrast to his usual detached efficiency. He resisted the urge to intervene, reminding himself that she had to prove her worth independently. Still, he found himself walking past her office more often than necessary, lingering in moments that seemed accidental but were anything but. The next day, the critical board meeting arrived. Maya's heart pounded as she entered the sleek conference room, her laptop clutched firmly in her hands. The executives were already assembled, their expressions ranging from impatient to skeptical. Alexander, sitting at the head of the table, offered her a brief nod of encouragement. That small gesture, though subtle, sent a thrill through her chest. "Ms. Johnson," he began, his tone formal but steady, "the floor is yours." Maya took a deep breath, projecting confidence she only partially felt. She launched into her presentation, articulating the data with clarity, anticipating questions before they arose, and demonstrating both depth of knowledge and strategic foresight. The room listened in silence, captivated not just by the numbers, but by the poise and intelligence she displayed. Alexander watched intently, his blue eyes tracking every movement, every expression. He noticed how her hands moved gracefully over the slides, how her voice never wavered, and how she maintained composure even under subtle scrutiny from skeptical board members. Pride, something he rarely allowed himself to feel openly, stirred within him. Maya was exceptional, and the realization left him both impressed and unsettled. The presentation concluded without a single flaw, and the room erupted into applause. Alexander leaned back in his chair, a rare, genuine smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Impressive work," he said quietly, his eyes locking with hers across the table. Maya felt a surge of relief and satisfaction, yet her emotions were complicated. She wanted to savor the moment, to allow herself a fleeting sense of accomplishment and recognition. But another feeling tugged at her heart, one she couldn't ignore. Alexander's gaze was lingering, subtle but deliberate, and it sent shivers through her despite her careful attempt at professionalism. Later, in the quiet of Alexander's office, a near-miss moment escalated the tension. He approached her desk to review some follow-up points, the distance between them shrinking with each step. "I want to discuss your recommendations in detail," he said, his tone calm but firm. Maya nodded, ready to respond, but the way he leaned slightly closer than necessary, the faint intensity in his eyes, made her heart race. She felt an almost magnetic pull toward him, yet she forced herself to remain composed. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood," she replied evenly, though her pulse betrayed her nerves. As they reviewed the points together, their hands brushed lightly over the laptop keyboard. The contact was brief, seemingly accidental, yet it sent a spark through both of them. Alexander froze for a fraction of a second, a reaction he immediately masked with professional detachment. Maya's cheeks flushed, and she quickly adjusted her posture, pretending nothing had happened. The moment ended, but the effect lingered. Both were acutely aware of the unspoken tension, of the delicate balance between professional restraint and personal desire. Alexander, frustrated by his own growing feelings, excused himself with a terse comment about another meeting. Maya exhaled quietly, heart pounding, aware that the connection between them had deepened in ways neither could ignore. The day took a turn for the dramatic when a minor crisis erupted. A key investor called with concerns about the merger, threatening to withdraw if certain figures weren't clarified. Panic rippled through the office, but Maya remained steady, calmly gathering data, rechecking analyses, and preparing a detailed report to reassure the client. Alexander, impressed but also tense, watched her navigate the crisis with composure and intelligence. "You've handled this perfectly," he said quietly later, the rare praise carrying weight beyond words. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Maya's heart swelled, both at the compliment and at the intimacy of the moment. She wanted to reply with more than thanks, to let him know the depth of her feelings. But professional decorum and her own fear of rejection held her tongue. By evening, the office was quiet, the city lights casting long shadows across the sleek floors. Maya gathered her things, preparing to leave, when Alexander approached once more. "Walk you to your car?" he asked, a subtle echo of the rainy night earlier. Maya hesitated, then nodded. Outside, the air was crisp and fragrant with a lingering scent of evening rain. The quiet between them was charged, heavy with unspoken words. "You've done well today," Alexander said, his tone softer than usual. He paused, searching for the right words. "I appreciate your dedication, more than I can easily express." Maya looked at him, her chest tight, her mind spinning. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood," she said softly, though her voice betrayed the rush of emotion she struggled to suppress. For a moment, they stood there, close enough that the space between them felt impossibly small, each aware of the tension that simmered just beneath the surface. Alexander wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, but hesitated, bound by propriety and caution. Maya wanted to lean in, to let the moment speak for itself. Yet restraint held her back. The near miss, the brush of hands, the lingering gaze, the unspoken admiration, left them both flustered and restless. That night, sleep came uneasily, filled with dreams of possibilities and missteps, of moments that could have been seized but weren't. The week ended with a mixture of triumph and tension. Maya had proven herself indispensable, navigating crises, impressing the board, and commanding respect from colleagues. Alexander had glimpsed the depth of her intellect and character, and he found himself drawn to her in ways he could neither articulate nor fully understand. Yet misunderstandings remained. Both struggled to navigate the delicate boundary between professionalism and burgeoning attraction. Rival interference from Olivia still lingered in the office, a reminder that external forces could complicate their growing connection. And above all, both Alexander and Maya were painfully aware of the subtle dance they were engaged in, a dance where one wrong move could tip the scales between desire and decorum, between confession and restraint. By the end of the week, one thing was clear. The spark that had begun at the gala, nurtured by retreat and proximity, had grown into a quiet flame. Neither could ignore it, and neither could control it. The tension was palpable, the stakes high, and the potential for both heartbreak and revelation looming on the horizon. And somewhere deep inside, both Alexander and Maya realized, though neither admitted aloud, that their lives had begun a trajectory neither had anticipated. The game of hearts was no longer a quiet undercurrent. It was building to a reckoning that neither could escape. The office was unusually quiet that Friday afternoon. Most employees had left for the weekend, leaving only the essential staff behind. Maya sat at her desk, reviewing reports one last time before shutting down for the week. The soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional click of a keyboard filled the space. Yet despite the calm, her mind was anything but. The week had been intense. High-stakes meetings, investor calls, and constant scrutiny, but she had handled it all. And still, her thoughts kept returning to Alexander. The near misses, the subtle glances, the rare moments when his icy exterior had softened. Each memory sent her heart racing. Each glance from him replayed in her mind endlessly. Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps made her glance up. Alexander stood there, the late afternoon light from the floor-to-ceiling windows casting long shadows across the office. His expression was unreadable, calm yet deliberate, but there was something different tonight, something softer, more vulnerable beneath his usual precision. "Maya," he began, his voice quieter than usual, almost hesitant. "Do you have a moment?" She nodded, her chest tightening. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood." He gestured toward the small seating area near the windows. "Sit with me for a moment. I need to discuss everything." Her pulse quickened, curiosity mingling with nervous anticipation. She followed him, taking a seat across from him, her hands resting lightly in her lap. Alexander took a deep breath, his piercing blue eyes locking with hers. "I need to apologize," he said, the words measured but sincere, "for any misunderstandings." for the moments when I may have seemed cold or critical. Maya's brows furrowed slightly. "Misunderstandings?" she asked softly, unsure if he truly realized what he was addressing. He nodded, leaning forward slightly. "I realize now that I misread your actions, your demeanor. I assumed distance or indifference when, in reality, it was your professionalism, and perhaps something more, that kept you measured. I didn't account for your feelings." Her breath caught in her throat. The confession, so unexpected yet so sincere, sent a thrill through her. "Alexander, she began, but hesitated, unsure she should reveal the depth of her own emotions. He held up a hand, quieting her. "Please, let me finish. I've been careful, controlling, reserved, because I feared the wrong move, the wrong word. But I can't ignore it any longer. Maya, He paused, searching for the courage to speak the truth he had held back for months. "I care about you, more than I have allowed myself to admit." Maya's eyes widened, and her heart pounded with relief and joy. The walls she had built around her emotions trembled. "Alexander, I've cared about you for a long time," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've tried to hide it, tried to focus on work, but—" She paused, letting the weight of her words settle between them. "I couldn't." For a moment, the room was silent except for the distant hum of the city below. Then Alexander reached across the small table, his hand brushing against hers. The contact was deliberate, grounding, intimate. Maya's breath hitched, the reality of the moment settling in. "I thought you might hate me," he admitted softly, a hint of vulnerability threading his words. "I assumed your professionalism was disdain. I never imagined," he trailed off, shaking his head slightly, unable to finish the sentence. Maya's lips curved into a gentle smile. "I never hated you," she said. "I was afraid that admitting my feelings would ruin everything, that I might lose my place, or that you wouldn't feel the same." Alexander's expression softened, and for the first time in months, the tension that constantly coiled around him seemed to ease. "You've been incredibly brave," he said quietly. "Braver than I am, in many ways." The moment hung between them, electric and tender. Slowly, Alexander's hand covered hers, fingers intertwining in a gesture that spoke more than words ever could. Maya's heart soared, and she let herself savor the rare, intimate connection with a man she had admired and loved for so long. Before they could speak further, the sound of footsteps approaching reminded them of reality. Olivia, ever the opportunist, appeared at the doorway, eyes wide with false innocence. "Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, voice lilting with feigned cheerfulness. Alexander, with a subtle sigh, withdrew his hand and composed his expression. Maya straightened, maintaining professionalism despite the flush still lingering on her cheeks. Olivia's intrusion was a reminder that the world outside their moment still existed, full of rivalries, gossip, and expectations. Later that evening, Maya walked to the elevator, the warmth of Alexander's hand still lingering in her memory. She felt a renewed sense of confidence and hope. The misunderstandings that had plagued them, the misread glances, the near misses, they were now behind them. Alexander knew her heart, and she knew his. Meanwhile, Alexander returned to his office, alone for the first time that evening. The confession weighed on him, but in the best possible way. He realized that control of his life had always been easy. Controlling his heart, however, was another matter entirely. He smiled to himself, a rare, genuine expression, knowing that the hardest and most important challenge he would ever face was no longer professional, but personal. Over the following days, the office dynamic shifted subtly. There were still moments of tension and misinterpretation, but now they were layered with shared understanding and mutual affection. Small gestures, a lingering glance, a light touch on the shoulder, subtle smiles across the boardroom, spoke volumes. Alexander and Maya navigated their professional responsibilities while exploring the depths of their newfound emotional connection. By the end of the week, both felt a sense of relief and anticipation. The confessions had cleared months of unspoken tension, replacing uncertainty with a delicate, flourishing intimacy. And although challenges remained, rivals like Olivia, high-stakes business dealings, and the constant demands of their professional lives. They now face them together, not as individuals separated by misperception, but as partners united by honesty, respect, and a shared, undeniable affection. The stage was set for the final act of their story. With misunderstandings resolved and confessions made, the path forward was clear, but the journey toward true, unrestrained love still awaited. And as Alexander and Maya moved through the city's bustling streets, side by side, each step carried the promise of a future neither had dared to imagine until now. The city skyline shimmered under the soft glow of early evening lights, the streets buzzing faintly with a hum of life below. Alexander Blackwood sat in his corner office, gazing out at the view. Yet unlike his usual moments of solitude, his thoughts weren't filled with mergers, spreadsheets, or boardroom strategies. They were filled with Maya, her smile, her unwavering confidence, the warmth that had slowly, irresistibly seeped into the edges of his heart. The week had been transformative. Confessions had been made, misunderstandings cleared, and the tension that had been a constant undercurrent now evolved into something deeper, something undeniably real. Their dynamic in the office had subtly shifted. Glances lingered. Smiles were shared quietly, and small, intimate gestures replaced the tense near misses of the past. Alexander found himself thinking about her during meetings, reviewing her work with an appreciation that went far beyond professional respect. Maya, meanwhile, carried herself with renewed confidence, buoyed by the knowledge that her feelings were reciprocated. That evening, Alexander had arranged a private dinner in the company's rooftop garden, a secluded area away from prying eyes. The garden overlooked the city, with soft fairy lights strung between trees and lanterns casting a warm, golden glow. A gentle breeze carried the faint scent of blooming flowers, and the soft murmur of a nearby fountain completed the serene atmosphere. Maya arrived, radiant in a simple yet elegant dress, the faint shimmer of sequins catching the light. She hesitated for a moment at the top of the stairs, taking in the scene before Alexander stepped forward, his expression softening as he saw her. "Good evening, Maya," he said, voice low and warm, extending his hand in a gesture both formal and intimate. "Good evening, Alexander," she replied, her pulse quickening as she took his hand, feeling the familiar strength in his grip. He guided her to the table, and they sat across from each other. For a moment, neither spoke, simply enjoying the quiet intimacy, the soft glow of the city around them. Then Alexander leaned slightly forward, his gaze fixed on hers. "Maya," he began, choosing his words carefully, "these past weeks, everything we've been through, all the misunderstandings, the near misses, I realize now how much I've underestimated something far more important than business." Her lips curved into a gentle, expectant smile. "And what's that?" she asked softly. "The connection between us," he said, his tone deliberate, eyes locking with hers. "I was blind to it for too long. I mistook your professionalism for indifference. I assumed distance where there was loyalty, respect, and affection. I can't ignore it anymore." Maya's heart raced. "Alexander, I felt the same way," she admitted, voice trembling slightly, though steady in its honesty. "I was afraid to say anything, afraid it might ruin what we have, but I can't hide it anymore either." A slow, genuine smile spread across Alexander's face. "Then we're honest with each other," he said simply, reaching across the table to take her hand. "No more assumptions, no more doubts. Just us." Maya's eyes glistened as she nodded. The tension, the longing, the months of hidden admiration, all crystallized into this moment of clarity. She felt an overwhelming sense of relief and joy, knowing that her feelings were not only reciprocated, but shared with the man she had admired from the start. The dinner that followed was intimate and relaxed, far removed from the formalities of boardrooms and meetings. They laughed, shared small personal stories, and allowed themselves to truly see each other, not as CEO and assistant, but as two people drawn together by respect, admiration, and love. After dessert, Alexander stood and extended his hand toward Maya once more. "May I?" he asked, a playful yet earnest glint in his eyes. Maya smiled, placing her hand in his. He guided her to the edge of the rooftop, where the city lights stretched endlessly before them. Then, without hesitation, he leaned in and she met him halfway. The kiss was gentle, slow, and deliberate, a culmination of weeks of tension, longing, and unspoken desire. It was a kiss that spoke of understanding, patience, and the promise of a shared future. When they finally parted, both were breathless, smiling at the intimacy they had found. "I think we're going to be very good together," Alexander murmured, his forehead resting briefly against hers. Maya laughed softly. "I think so, too." In the days that followed, their relationship remained professional in the office, but moments of private closeness, shared lunches, subtle touches, lingering looks, kept their connection alive and growing. They navigated complexities of workplace boundaries with care, but there was no denying the spark that had now ignited into a steady flame. Even Olivia, the persistent rival, eventually relented, realizing that Maya's competence and Alexander's clear affection were unshakable. Attempts to create friction lost their potency, and the office atmosphere subtly shifted, favoring collaboration and mutual respect over petty competition. Weeks later, in a quieter moment at the office, Alexander summoned Maya to his office again. Not for work, but for a private conversation. He held a small, elegantly wrapped box in his hand. "Maya," he said, eyes shining, "these past months have been transformative. You've challenged me, impressed me, and, most importantly, you've shown me what it means to truly connect with someone." He handed her the box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, simple but exquisite, a subtle symbol of commitment. Maya's eyes widened, touched by the gesture. "I want you to know," Alexander continued, "that this isn't just about affection or admiration. It's about partnership. In life, in work, in everything. I want us to face it all together." Maya, overwhelmed with emotion, smiled through tears. "Yes, Alexander," she whispered, her voice trembling with happiness. "Together." In the weeks and months that followed, their relationship blossomed openly and beautifully. Respect, trust, and love became the foundation of both their personal and professional lives. Boardroom victories and corporate challenges were sweeter because they faced them as partners. And every small gesture, a shared smile across a meeting table, a quiet text during a busy day, the occasional brush of hands, was a reminder of the connection that had taken months to cultivate, but would last a lifetime. The story that had begun with misunderstandings, near misses, and unspoken longing now reached its full, radiant resolution. Alexander and Maya had found not only love, but a partnership rooted in admiration, intellect, and shared respect. And as they stood together on the rooftop one evening, looking out at the endless cityscape, both knew that whatever the future held, they would face it side by side, finally completely and unequivocally together. And so, in the heart of the city that brought them together, Maya and Alexander found more than respect and admiration. They found love. Against misunderstandings, rivalries, and the pressures of power, they chose honesty, trust, and each other. Side by side, they stepped into a future filled with possibility, passion, and unwavering partnership, ready to face the world together.